There's something about those covers of White Dwarf that really get me going. Is it possible for me to recreate a classic White Dwarf magazine cover? Let's find out. Welcome back to Anvil of Doom Miniatures. My name is Dietz, and I have one memory that really stands out when I was a kid. It was I used to go to the news agency with my dad. He'd read card magazines, I'd read White Dwarfs while my mum was shopping. And there was something about those White Dwarf covers that really drew me in. Just looking at the front cover of those magazines, they really dragged me into the world of what Warhammer was. And it really set the tone of what it is to me. Each cover had an amazingly epic scene, and I feel like if you were walking past, your eyes would be darted towards it. When I was around the age of 8, 9 or 10, I used to draw so much, and I really took inspiration from White Dwarf magazine. It was a dream of mine to become a cover artist for White Dwarf and have my artwork one day on those magazines. Unfortunately, my life took me on a bit of a different path. I still went down an artistic route and an illustration type route, but my style really developed a bit more of like a pop art, fun, comic book tattoo type art instead of your grim, dark fantasy. Basically, the art I create would be the exact opposite of what GW would want for their grim, dark world. But I'm not going to let that stop me today. Recently, I had this urge to pick up the pen again and recreate a classic White Dwarf magazine, one that really stands out to me, and it probably stands out to a lot of you as well. So in today's episode, I'm going to pay tribute to those White Dwarf covers and the amazing artists behind them, and recreate an Anvil of Doom styled White Dwarf cover. All the purists who love that grim, dark tone are probably going to hate me after this because I'm going for something a little bit more lighthearted. So with the hundreds of White Dwarf issues that have been out, what cover do I love the most? Well, it's issue number 90, and this one has an early depiction of Grombrindle on the front cover. He's standing there proud in a really harsh fantasy-like environment, and it makes me wonder what he's been up to, what adventures he's been on. So this cover was illustrated by the massively talented John Civic, who worked with GW in the 80s, and he also created the cover for the first edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So today I'll be basing my art on this cover, but first let's get into what equipment I'll be using to recreate this artwork. Now, when I illustrate, I use a free program called Procreate. You can install this on any tablet device, Apple or Android if you use Android. All you really need is a stylus or Apple Pen, but you can use your finger if you're brave enough. Procreate is super simple and easy to use. It's basically just like a big canvas that you can draw on. Basically, you just put a layer down. It's got plenty of design features on there, strokes, anything you really need to create whatever you want. You can create amazing paintings or just simple little drawings. But before we get started on my Anvil of Doom style White Dwarf cover, I just want to take you through something fun with Procreate that I think you guys could probably use when designing your own little banners. So firstly, find that banner that you're after, take a photo or a screenshot of it and import it into Procreate, and then simply just make a new layer. I'm using a screenshot from an old High Elf banner from a 4th edition codex. And then from here, it's very simple. You just trace all the outlines of the artwork like I'm doing here. This obviously will take some practice, but I do find the monoline stroke the best for this type of line work. You may want to add something else to the banner, which is easy to do as well. I recommend sitting down for a couple hours and having fun playing around with it. Adding color is a really simple process as well. I just make a new layer underneath the line work, and then I could just simply drag and drop colors like you see here. You can also add more detail to the color by doing another layer underneath it, but this is just a really simple way to show you how easy it is. And here is a simple High Elf banner that literally took me 20 minutes to make. Anyway, I hope that helped you guys in some way. Now let's get back into creating this White Dwarf cover. So I'm always going to have a reference image handy when I'm drawing. I'll have the issue number 90 up on my screen next to me so I don't stray too far away from the original. So starting out, I draw a rough sketch of the body, where I want the head, rough background details. The first sketch is always going to be super rough with no detail and will look like a bit of a mess, but that's okay. As this is a digital drawing, I can always erase and alter the picture much quicker and can make way more mistakes. It's been a bit over a year since I've really sat down and tried to draw properly, so I do feel a little bit rusty, but I'm hoping as time goes on with this drawing, I will warm up and get back into my groove. Now once I was happy with that layout, I made another layer on top and then added some rough features to the image and started to plan my look a little bit more. I'll start putting down features like the face, the hair, the armor, and the axe. This is the layer where my imagination really starts to explode, and I start to think about backstories, tales about Grombrindle, all sorts of fun things. Again, this layer is another rough draft. I'm just making sure the shapes, the eyes, and the features look correct to the eye. Now it's time for the final drawing, and on this layer is where I really take my time and use the image underneath as a guide and draw to the best of my ability. Out of the whole process, this part probably took the longest, as the details are key to a good illustration. I've never really been great at drawing lifelike images that you see in codexes and GW materials. I do find it a little hard to concentrate when attempting illustrations like this. I've always been a big fan of comic books, pop art, high fantasy, and traditional tattoos, so I feel like what I create is a bit of a mix of these styles. One thing I'm doing while the lines are going down is to always check the original John Civic image to make sure I'm not veering too far off. I really want this fan illustration to be instantly recognizable. So once the line work was done for the Grombrindle, I then added my background line work, and I try to match up the scenery from the original artwork as best as I can. I want to make this background a bit more simple so Grombrindle is the main focus of the image. After a couple hours, I was finally done with the main illustration of the artwork. But I'll definitely go back and play around and adjust things later on, but it's time for colour. And thank God, because this process is much easier than painting a mini. Over time, I really developed a love for softer pastel colours, and I feel like John's original artwork would work well with these tones. I give the original colours a nice pastel variation. I do have a little bit of a trial and error mentality with this, and it's lucky I'm using an iPad and creating this digitally. If I had to do it like they did back in the day, I would be struggling. I add my darker shades, trying to keep them in the right positions, and then add some highlights all over. It's basically like a big digital colouring in book at this point, and it's really enjoyable. Towards the end of my illustration, I always go back and add things like different colours, different textures, just to make the artwork pop a little bit more. Okay, so the main illustration is pretty much complete. Now it's time to add some color to the background. And I'm just going to use some of those red earthy tones, but obviously with a bit of a pastel twist. And it wouldn't be an Anvil of Doom style illustration without some clouds and some pretty cool little twinkly stars. And to finish off, I had a nice little White Dwarf header I made earlier. And here it is, my Anvil of Doom inspired issue number 90 White Dwarf cover. I sometimes think to myself that painting miniatures and the tabletop game itself are only really one part of what makes Warhammer what it is. The world building that John Blanche, Ian Miller, and John Sibbick and so many others have done is absolutely mind-blowing and really set the tone and starting off point for us as gamers, as painters, as people who love lore, anything like that. They've really set that starting off point for us to kind of venture out. To me, the illustration and artworks of this hobby are just as important as anything else, and they should be celebrated. I was thinking to myself the other week, wouldn't it be great if Games Workshop hired an artist who'd had a bit of a different style or a different take to illustrate the cover of a White Dwarf every now and then? So if you know anyone at Games Workshop, let them know Dietz from Anvil of Doom is knocking at the door and he will do a White Dwarf cover for them. If you're a fan of the artwork I created today, hit me up on Instagram. My link is in my bio. Send me a message. I don't know if I'm going to make these into prints. Who knows? I don't know if anyone wants them, but if the numbers are there and everyone wants one, then maybe I will, and I can give you some more details there. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this different video today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Cheers.